Hey everybody, another GMG review. Today we're taking a look at the Battletech paint starter, which includes some of the new speed paints from Army Painter. Now these are all designed with Battletech in mind. We got some themed speed paints in 5 colors. You've got a metal color, you've got 4 or 3 standard, like just regular paints, and a brush-on primer, paintbrush, paint guide for generic miniature painting, paint guide for Battletech itself using the Army paints. And that's it. And it's from Topps, Catalyst Game Labs, and Army Painter. So this was kindly sent along as a complimentary review copy from Catalyst, and I have basically cracked open about 40 minutes ago and tried out so I can give you my opinions on them. Now, I have reviewed the Army Painter Mega Paint Set before. I used it to paint my Blood Bowl 2nd Season Edition starter set. I used it to paint all my first run of Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures, all my X-Men and stuff as well, and was really happy with it. They're great paints. I have not, however, tried the speed paints yet. I have used lots of the contrast style paints, which are basically just painting with like inks and washes. It's like a wash painting product line that's very popular in the last few years if you're coming to painting for the first time, and this leans into that. So it appears from the outside, the core mission of this paint set is you're walking into this as a painter, you don't own any paints, it's trying to give you just enough that you can start painting your Battletech miniatures that you probably also picked up in the same shop, like this, like Inner Sphere Command Lance. And that you have the opportunity to get them just looking nice on the table with just what comes in here. So that's what I'm basing this review on, using just what came in this box. Was I able to get this kind of a result as shown in the painting guide? Obviously a few things that are not included. Battlefield basing and Tufts by Army Painter also not included. So could you get to this result? And the answer is yes, you definitely could. Your step-by-step is, well, you definitely could. Step-by-step from the beginning. First, they want you to use this, factory primer. I tried to use factory primer. I was afraid it wouldn't adhere super well to the basic Battletech plastic, so I can't actually speak to that, and I was trying to get this done. So I brushed it over a Zenithal Prime job I have on this Thunderbolt, and I don't love it. I'm not a fan of brush-on primers. This would probably be fine going through an airbrush. Brushing on a primer, you're always going to get streaking, and the instructions actually tell you to get a model ready. You need to prime it, thin down factory primer with a few drops of water, and apply 2 thin and even coats to the model, let it dry completely. I don't actually think that's how this miniature was done from the looks of things, honestly. There's speckling on the feet here that makes it look like a spray paint. You can definitely get away with it. I would never ever prime a plastic miniature with a brush-on primer, and here's why. A brush-on primer has no etching agent in it. An etching agent is a slightly corrosive chemical that's in most spray paints that will slightly dissolve or weaken the top surface of whatever it's spraying onto in order to better bond with it underneath. Basically, it's like a chemical glue. You're trying to soften what's underneath so you can chemically adhere to it and etch into the model. On things like metal, it's an etching agent. It's almost like an acidity will leach into the metal's like uneven surface and cause it to grip. What this means is your paint doesn't chip off or rub off as easily. And a lot of people who use airbrush primers will report that if you use them on metal miniatures, there's a tendency or a more likely to damage by handling that happens. You have to really carefully seal them afterwards to make sure that doesn't happen. So you're risking the sort of like adhesion to the miniature by using these. I don't want to do that, especially when it comes to using things like a speed paint or contrast paint. The weaker the underlying bond, the more potential you have for the liquid process to kind of dissolve and not react properly to what's underneath it. So, first report, this is an okay white paint. I would just use it as white paint. I would go buy myself a can of white spray paint because you're going to get better results if you have a nice, consistent covering of the miniature. So what I did was I sprayed that Thunderbolt, tried to paint the primer on it. It did not give me a great result, even with 2 like thin down coats, and so I abandoned it and went with some white primer I have. You can use any white primer. The Army Painter one's great. The Corax White from GW is great. They're great. But the more evenly distributed your undercoat is, the better that these kind of speed or contrast paints are going to look. And that's step 2, speed paint it. So Also, trying to base coat a miniature with this teeny little like starter brush was almost the the worst part. It's kind of impossible. So get yourself a bigger brush too if you want to do that. I would even recommend getting a bigger, softer brush for applying the speed paints because it's going to take you a while. And because the drying process is what creates this overall sort of like transition in color, you want it to go on quickly and all at once and dry at the same time. So my base color, I get 5 speed paints. This one is Guerrilla Red, which actually is more vibrant even than this Marauder's painted in. I don't know, maybe the photography like washed it out a little bit, but this Guerrilla Red's way richer. And I'm actually really happy with the Guerrilla Red. I think it's a great one. I will say they came out really thin. They're a lot more like India ink, which is like an artist's ink, than the more medium, rich, heavier, kind of stickier contrast paints are by GW. So you didn't need a lot, and it covered really well. And you can see it like stain my fingers. Like I couldn't even wash these off afterwards. This was the first one I put down, and I was immediately like, whoa, I used way too much, because I kind of like squirted out enough to be the same as like I'd use with like a contrast paint, like just to get on my palette, and did not need all of the paint I put down. There's also, that was Guerrilla Red. There's also, which one's this one? Merrick Purple, really nice rich purple. And there's a nice transition between the dark and light. You can see how heavy it is around the feet, how liquidy it is, because it's pooling basically as it's drying. You can also see how it's already rubbed off a little bit in the back there just from me handling it. You've got, and that's just the primer underneath. That's why this is a spray on primer even. Be liberal with your primer and make it even. This is the Steiner Blue, nice and rich as well. I was very happy with that. And then Davian Green. This is kind of the military green, which I really liked. Nice for mercenaries and stuff too. And then finally, Lao Green, which is this vibrant green, which is the one I actually finished. Now I was trying to figure out what I was gonna paint these in. I had an Urban Mech company where I was like, I never need to paint 12 Urban Mechs, I don't think. Insert whatever joke in the comments you guys want. So the one I finished was a Lao Urban Mech using the bright contrast, or not bright contrast, bright speed paint. You can see I did the metallics on it afterwards, which was the next step in the guide. The details, I actually used the blue, the Steiner Blue, and then one of the other 2 strong paints, or 3 strong paints. It was the PPC Blue to highlight it. And then I painted the base. Now here's where I ran into my next bit of trouble after the primer. Wah, wah, wah. This had a clog in it. I squeezed it a teeny bit too hard, and assuming I didn't know anything, the top flew off, and we had a battlefield brown explosion. Which took place. So be mindful of these droppers. I like to just have usually when I use them, I wasn't expecting for a brand new paint. Usually what I have lying around is just paper clip that you can kind of like fish down the nozzle with and clean out. But I ended up putting out way more brown than I thought I was going to, and painting the base. So the weathering, it says you can use a dry brush, stipple little weathering effects to make it look damaged. I didn't bother doing that, but you could rip a piece of sponge even and just like sponge on some battle damage. And then it says finish it with extra little bits and pieces. So it was basically prime, speed paint, paint the metallics, paint the details, paint the base, and then if you want to weather it and be done. But I got that result. So I got a House Lao Urban Mech out of this. The one thing I will say though about the other 2 paints, the blue is nice and strong and pigment heavy. I tried everything to get this yellow to go on. All of these paints have, listen, an agitator in them. There's something in there basically to try and mix the pigment and the paint. This one, agitator's loose, that's good. It means the paint's evenly distributed. It took me forever to get the hazard yellow agitator to come out, and I could not get this either mixed properly or to come out as a yellow. It came out transparent the whole time. I even used some painting tricks. I mixed some of the brown and the white into it, trying to get it to come out stronger, and I could not get the yellow to cover. So that hazard yellow, either you gotta shake, like I shook it for like 5 minutes. Like I really shook the hell out of it because it was not coming out covering. And then I eventually, you can see I put brown into it and then a little bit of white to make it look kind of yellow, but it's not the vibrant yellow that's here, right? There's nothing that strong on that miniature. And I could not get it to come out strong enough. I had no problem with the yellows in the Army Painter Mega Paint set, so I don't know what it is with this one in particular. It also isn't very hazard yellowy. It's like a lemon yellow. I would have probably gone with more of like a sun yellow, you know what I mean? Like more of a traditional kind of like sunshiny yellow, which is a bit richer, a bit more towards red or orange. And that might have helped, maybe, I don't know, in the CMYK mix of whatever the chemicals are in there. It was the only other paint, besides my paint explosion with the brown and the factory primer, which is fine as a white paint, that I had any kind of struggle with. The speed paints were great. They did exactly what they said on the tin, and the brown was fine, the metallic was fine. I did need to mix the metallic quite a bit too. All metallics are gonna be like that because the pigment is so different from the pigment in a colored paint. It's usually it's more granular, so you have to mix them really well to get the consistency. But they came out fine. And that was it. So I was able to replicate basically what's in the paint guide. Now it does give you like the rest of the range in the back here, and this painting guide in here is probably the next steps thing that you'll read if you're just beginning to paint. And it's pretty good. It goes from like cleaning, it has some really practical advice actually. Cleaning miniatures, how to prime miniatures properly, base coating them properly, airbrushing potentially if you want to as well, applying washes and what the differences look like once you've done that, and then other things they have like shades, dry brushing, and then doing bases and doing battlefields and stuff too. And all of this stuff's available from Army Painter obviously, and adds a nice level of detail to whatever you're painting. So this is like the afterwards guide. Most Battletech players, if they've never painted before, will probably just want to stick to this in the beginning, and this could like be some next steps for you. So overall impressions and thoughts. Well, I think if you are a first-time painter and you're trying to lean into getting stuff done quickly on the battlefield, having a themed paint set for Battletech obviously is great. It gives you some really popular like major faction colors. It gives you a brush, which is handy, and it does give you like an achievable standard of finished in this thing that I think anybody could do. And using just what came in this box, some paper towel and some water, I got to that with this little Lao Urban Mech. One thing I would say is that the one thing you always want to have in a paint set that isn't in here is not just white, but black too. You can make everything lighter with these paints. You can't make anything darker. Having black and white in any paint set, even with the limited range of colors, because you can basically use these speed paints with a dot of white in them as paints of the same color if you want, or even maybe a dot of this yellow. That could be something you could use it for. By adding a bit of pigment to that liquid, you can tint the white basically, which means you can highlight any of these colors with this primer, white primer, and the speed paints that are in there. But you can't make anything darker. So I couldn't do like the barrel in black on this autocannon. I couldn't add the base rim in black. Every starter paint set, in my opinion, should have black and white in it, because then no matter what the other color mix is in there, you can add light and dark, right? You can add lights and darks. You can even make like your own wash. You can follow a bunch of what comes in these paint guides by adding and subtracting light to the colors in the color mix. Apart from that, I think that's it. That's my only other criticism. There's some functional stuff, obviously, that wasn't that wasn't great for like a review process. Either this is a bad mix of the hazard yellow, or get a different yellow if you want some yellow. And this was just a mechanical failure. There's nothing. I don't blame Army Painter or Catalyst for that. That just happens sometimes in paints when you're making hundreds and hundreds of paints that they blow up. So just be mindful and don't just ham hock it like I did and be like, I'll just squeeze a little bit harder, it'll be fine. And then it wasn't fine. And I got some cool Urban Mechs to finish up in these house colors. So I'll probably try and paint something new with these speed paints. I'm not sure what yet, as I'm currently working on my Northwind Highlanders out of the new Alpha Strike starter set. I got some cool new stuff in the Mercenaries Kickstarter that I've got sent in advance too that I'll show you guys coming up soon to paint and add to my Northwind Highlanders, which I'm pretty excited about. But I think this is a perfect, if you've never done this before, this is just the right mix of like easy to do, achievable results, a follow along paint guide. I do think it does, it could be a little clearer on like, it doesn't have to be this color. Pick any of the speed paint colors, right? Just pick one of the speed paint colors for the faction you want to paint and then do it. There could be a little more Battletech lingo in here, I think. But I mean, pictographically, you can just follow along and see what you need to do next. So good jumping off point. Cool that it's themed. Really cool is if you want a sneak preview into what I'm going to be painting for Northwind Highlanders, Randall sent me the mechs and the vehicles that are on this piece of artwork on the cover of this paint set, which I'm pretty pumped for. So some kind of iconic mechs I'm going to paint out of my Northwind Highlanders. And that's it. So big thanks for watching. If you are looking to paint your Battletech miniatures for the first time, I think this is a great jumping off point. And I hope before you grab this paint set, if you watch it, you can get some insight into what you're in for and maybe some do's and don'ts for starting to paint. So we'll see you next time for more GMG reviews. Till then, I'm Ash. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video. There are tons of other games already recorded for you to watch. Click over to my channel page if you haven't already, and have a look to the dozens of playlists full of videos. I guarantee you'll discover a game you haven't seen played before. I put out new videos 7 days a week, and every day is themed to a different genre as I continue to explore the wider world of gaming. Of course, none of that's possible without you, the viewer, so click a like and subscribe if you'd like to stay on top of what's happening here daily. My 2 kids and I are massively grateful to be able to have the flexibility of this job so I can always maximize my time with them. If you want to support me continuing to put out this content, it's only possible because of my amazing backers on Patreon who support the studio, equipment, and model cost, as well as being how I make the bulk of my living. You can also help out by buying a t-shirt through Spreadshirt, a measuring gauge or widget from Death Ray Designs, or buying one of my games and supplements like Last Days, Gamma Wolves, and Blaster. As a way of showing my appreciation, patrons get early access to new games and supplements that I write throughout the course of the year. Huge thanks for watching, it really does help out, and happy gaming.